Welcome back. Well, there is an ongoing debate about how heavily we should be regulating the banking industry. But what impact will increased regulation have at an operational level? Bruce Nixon, CEO of HoloCentric, is an expert in the field of business management, and he joins us now for more, I suppose, particularly in regards to compliance, because it's going to be obviously a huge issue for these financial institutions when we see changing regulations. Certainly been seeing it on a global stage. So how big an adjustment do you think is potentially coming for the likes of the banks with this focus on changing regulation?
Yeah, I think the banks are used to continuing increases in regulation, and they need to respond with the changes in their processes regardless of what those regulations are. But with something like the Murray inquiry underway, there's no doubt going to be an increase in the regulation tightening up of the compliance obligations. So they have to be able to respond very effectively to that and have that embedded without making incremental increases in their costs and inefficiencies.
So is it, despite some of the big ticket sort of regulatory changes like a Dodd-Frank's in the US or the Murray inquiry over here, is it a constantly evolving landscape for large financial institutions despite those big ticket inquiries?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the complexity in financial institution increases all the time.
Yeah.
Technological change comes along, further compliance obligations, regulations change. Customer expectations are changing all the time, so they need to be able to respond to those and to be able to modify the way they work to meet those continuing, more complex demands.
Sounds difficult, though. I mean, to constantly stay ahead of this.
It is difficult. Banks are very complex operating systems these days. They have the complexities of the past, the old systems, the new capabilities, new technologies, and they are increasingly complex, so they have to be very agile in the way to respond to those so the costs don't blow out.
You mentioned technology a couple of times.
Yeah.
How big of an impact does that have on the change that we're talking about?
Well, if you think of a bank as a working system, there's a lot of interacting parts in the bank. So the technology that people utilise for their banking systems needs to be supported by the business processes behind the scenes, which need to be compliant with the regulations. And so when you look at all those different parts, it's a very complex ecosystem that needs to be supported in a banking environment.
Is there ongoing behavioural changes as well internally to what is happening externally?
Certainly there are behavioural changes, customer expectations, customer service levels. We've seen issues around fees and inquiries in that regard as well. So the banks need to be able to respond to that so that they can have greater efficiencies in the way they deal with these things.
What about ramifications for not being adequately prepared?
Yeah, I think one of the issues is that you're never quite sure what's next. What are the changes that are coming down the track? What are the changes in technology? What are the changes in regulations? But the banks certainly know there will be change, so best to be prepared for that. And if you take the precautions now, start getting a better understanding of how these different parts of the organisation work together so that you're in a much better position to respond to the change that is inevitable in any banking organisation.
The difficulty, I would have thought, with that, though, is adequately preparing for something that you don't know what the outcome is going to be.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And at HoloCentric, we work with some more enlightened organisations who take more of the precautionary steps. So try and get ahead of the curve by building a model. So a model simulates how the organisation works, and if you can turn that into an operating system, then you can navigate that model. So if you map out the relationships between compliance obligations, business processes, how people use systems, you're in a much better position because you've got a better, much more useful corporate knowledge about your organisation, so you can implement change much more effectively.
And so what is it then that HoloCentric brings to the table?
So we help to to manage the complexity. Complexity exists in banking organisations and many other organisations, but helping to manage that complexity. So mapping out the relationships between regulations, compliance, how they meet the compliance obligations, the business processes, the systems that people use and the responsibilities that people have. So we build a fairly complex, or we build a representation of that complexity so that we can simplify it from different perspectives.
And so does that mean that the difficult task for you is then also staying up to date with the ever-changing regulatory compliance kind of shifting landscape?
Yeah, certainly we need to be agile enough to be
Yeah.
able to incorporate those new changes, those new regulations, those new technologies very quickly into that operating model so that we can determine the impact of the changes in any of those items and across the organisation.
Fantastic. Bruce Nixon, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Moving on now, and just before we go, accounting software company MYOB on cloud nine after posting record half-year earnings. The company reported some $70 million. That's up 29%. For more, Sky News business reporter Dan Murphy spoke with MYOB CEO Tim Reid.
Results really represent the hard work that we've been doing for our clients over the last 6 months. But if we have a look at the top line, $140 million in revenue, which is over 20% growth year on year from where we were for the first 6 months last year, which is fantastic and really representative of the number of new clients that we've brought into the business, and also those clients that are now using our cloud-based or online accounting solutions. So it's a fantastic move for all of us because everyone's proud to be part of a team that is doing great things for our clients. And at the heart of MYOB, it really is about serving small businesses, serving the accountants who work with them, and making sure we make their business life easier. And I think these results really show that we've been doing that very successfully through the first 6 months of the year.
There's lots of market talk and, of course, rumours that owner Bain Capital is considering an IPO for MYOB next year. Can you confirm that for us?
So I read about that, which is always interesting. Bain Capital do own MYOB, and they've owned us for 3 years, and the business model of private equity is to find great businesses, to invest and improve those businesses, and then eventually to exit. Bain generally is a 5 to 7 year time frame, and we've only been 3 years into that cycle. So I can assure you right now that the board is very focused on the business and very proud of the results that we're driving, and looking forward to what we've got coming up in the next 6 months, which I believe will deliver even greater value to our clients, which will be reflected in stronger results for us. So right now there is no focus on our business on an IPO. We are very focused on the operating business and making sure that we're doing a great job for our clients.
In any case, has a timeline been set for listing?
So absolutely, for a private equity firm, it is a goal to transition ownership to a new set of owners at some point in time, and that is Bain's goal for MYOB, and therefore as the company, it is our goal for ourselves as well. Whether that's through a listing or whether it's through a sale to another private equity firm or to a strategic buyer of some sort is not determined, and you know, frankly never would be up until the point where that transaction actually takes place. So it's not a goal per se to list, but there will be a sale of the business. That is the business model of private equity. The question is probably more around what type of a sale and when, and you know, right now we're not focused on it, so I'm not able to provide any more of a specific response.
Some market watchers say that MYOB could be our next carsales.com or REA Group. What do you make of that sort of commentary, and what's your response?
Look, I think that reflects the underlying performance of the business, that we have a very strong leadership position, that we are a strong and established brand, that we have high growth credentials, and I think if you look at the sort of plus 20% revenue growth and almost 30% EBITDA or profit growth in our business, then you can understand drawing those parallels, because they're fantastic underlying financial results for a business not dissimilar to the companies that you spoke about. I think if you looked at the size of the value of our organisation, it would probably also be in a similar range to those sorts of companies. So I don't think they're bad comparables, but again, you know, that's if we list at some point in the future.
And just more broadly, looking at the results now, why is the acquisition of PayGlobal a strategic fit for MYOB?
PayGlobal brings some really unique assets to our business that will enable us to strengthen our overall product offering. About 8 years ago, we decided to make the move from not just serving small businesses and accountants in practice, but really dedicate a team of people to medium-sized businesses, so small enterprises, some sort of 20 or 50 employees up to 200 to 500 employee businesses. And that's been a very successful part of our business. It's been the fastest growing part of our business over the last 5 years, but because our whole business is growing, today it represents just 8% of our business. And so one of the ways for us to increase the growth in that area is to acquire businesses who serve similar clients with products that are complementary to what our products in that area do.
And that is it for the show this evening. Peter, of course, back tomorrow.